All right, we're live. Thanks everyone for joining us. We're just going to wait a few seconds before we get started so that people can join the feed here. We'll start doing some intros. All right, let's get started here. So thanks everyone for joining us again. We're here to talk about how to host an online cannabis event. And I'm very excited by the kind of meta nature of this topic, that we are having a webinar about hosting webinars. I'm also very excited about the really stellar lineup that we have here today of participants. I'm going to introduce you to in a second. Basically, I feel like we've got representatives from the biggest cannabis events of this season. Of this year, and it gives us a stage to talk about online cannabis events in general, and also specifically during what has been, a fairly extraordinary year, and which has forced us to take live events online and to kind of make the best of the situation. So I don't want to do too much talking here. I also feel like this topic is very clear why it's important for really brands and businesses of all shapes and sizes to learn how to put themselves in front of their audiences online. I'm going to kind of let the panel here to take do most of the talking here. So I'm going to do a quick round of introductions here. I see everyone's started to add their companies and titles to their names, which is great. So a quick round. So we have Jack Fried here from Analytical Cannabis, Carey Fried from Canatech, Jake, I'm sorry, I don't know how to pronounce your last name. I should have asked this before. Jake, how do you pronounce your last name?
3 syllables, Kuczeruk.
There you go, so Jake Kuczeruk. Question I should have asked beforehand. From the Arcview group, we've got Pamela from MJBizDaily, John from The Compound, here to specifically talk about Whole Plant Expo, and Stephen Murphy from Prohibition Partners. So because we've got a pretty big panel here today, we're going to kind of split up the topics that we want to go through, but anyone really feel free to jump in with questions or comments along the way. And for everyone watching, if you have any questions or comments, please pop them in the chat. We're going to try and answer, I'll try and answer some of them as we go if possible, and otherwise we'll have a kind of Q&A time at the end of the hour. So we're going to start off with the kind of nuts and bolts, like how do you put together an online event? So to start us off here, I'm going to pass over to Jack. If you can start, talking through the mechanics of it, and then we've got a couple of other people on the panel who are going to jump into it as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Elana. And I know Carey and Jake, you are both keen to jump in on this as well. So please don't leave it all down to me. I think for us this year, we learned a lot about running online events and where to start with them. But we were very fortunate that we actually started our online event program back in 2017. So we weren't completely new to this world when everything kicked in, albeit that we had to transition our physical events very quickly onto online as well. And for me, the big thing that I think we should all talk about first, and I know Carey and Jake have both got comments on this as well, is selecting your platform and the importance of making that decision and making the right decision as early as you possibly can. We've been with the same provider for the duration of our experience with online events since 2017, and it doesn't always work. And understanding the limitations of your platform is really important in driving the whole thing forward. Getting that to fall in line, that decision with building out your agenda and all of the considerations that come with that, in a timely manner, getting the right kind of people, bringing that alongside your marketing plan and getting that to kick off at the right time. And also, obviously, the big thing that we all rely on, sponsorship and exhibition opportunities. These are all of the things that we need to consider at the top level, but ensure that, on a day-to-day basis, all of the small jobs that those things result in are actually getting done. So I guess that's my view on the 4 big pillars that make up planning an online event. And like I say, I know that Carey and Jake have got their opinions to share as well.
Yeah, maybe before we jump over, Jack, I'd love to hear, you mentioned choosing your platform. Which platform do you use?
So we use a platform called vFairs. Honestly, we use vFairs because we've always used vFairs. We found them when we were very green to this 4 years ago. The price was right at the time. The features were right for us, namely tracking. They have a lot of tracking abilities, which is really important to us and our sponsors. But we're not 100% sure yet, but we're in the process of potentially moving away from them. Like I say, because we've learned so much this year about online events. And honestly, I think online events have changed this year. As somebody that was involved pre-pandemic and now, expectations have changed. And in my opinion, for the better. But people do demand more. And I know that one of the topics we're going to get into later is networking. And that's the big thing that people want to see more of. And more opportunities to do that, and that's potentially driving us to look at a new provider from 2021 onwards.
Sure.
Yeah, definitely.
I'll jump
Carey,
in
did you want to jump in? Oh yeah, Jake, go for it.
Yeah, with regards to platforms, we went through a very different journey at Arcview. For us, we've always been physical event people. It was 4 to 5 events every year in person. So we were caught a little bit off guard, I think in March, but we were proud to have something stood up and events, kicking off immediately, I think in April, if not a little bit before that. I think the big thing for us was, when it came to finding the right platform, was simplicity. So as you can imagine, Arcview's member base is a lot of older investors. Right from the very first event, we were getting a flood of emails. Hey, I got the registration link. I don't know where's the invite for this. We watched over webinar after webinar as they got a little bit more comfortable, and we found that actually Zoom was the easiest, best solution for us. We didn't want to overcomplicate it. We wanted something that did have breakout functionality if we needed it for certain events, but if we were just doing, a panel discussion, simple worked. And we watched, especially early on when COVID, a lot of other groups went out there, tried to use creative platforms, try to put stuff on YouTube. It got flagged immediately, the way everything on YouTube does. So it's a lot to contend with, I think, when it comes to this, like the best platform, but it all needs to boil down to what is the best fit for your audience. If they're younger, they're hipper, Instagram Live is going to be a great fit. If you're doing something that's investor focused, you even got to kind of gate who's accessing that. You can't be doing sensitive investor pitches to, not accredited people. So I think there's a lot of considerations there, but it really does largely boil down to your audience and the need for either simplicity or just a bulk of everything.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, we had an interesting experience too, similar to the Arcview experience, in that we had an event scheduled for March. And so we were literally watching the clock, watching the news, to figure out. Our pivot was literally overnight. So we kind of learned a lot, trial by fire and brute force. I think that what helped the strategy was that if you maintain your core brand identity and people know exactly what your product is and what you deliver, they'll hang with you, because we had some real technology challenges, and I was always grateful and surprised that people were not upset about the technology, because there was this empathy that existed throughout this period that we could kind of leverage, in that, we're all in this together. We're creating opportunities for people to get what they used to get from live experiences online, and people were pretty understanding. So we were kind of building the plane as we were flying it. We didn't have the experience, any kind of lead up to it. We just had to really dive in. So ours was all, literally decisions made overnight, and how to proceed to try to get through the shock of that live event being canceled, back in March.
I like Carey's analogy of building the plane while you're flying it. I think that's very apt for what I think probably all of us experienced in 2020. There's one other element I think that needs to be discussed with respect to planning an event, and that is the business model of the event. Some events are cost centers and some are profit centers, right? If you're having a sales event where you're bringing in all internal people, that's one type of event. If you're reaching out to an external audience, that's a different type of event. And I would gather, I'm going to guess that everybody here who has done an event that's reached out to an external audience as a business failed to meet expectations this year, because this year has just been a brutal year. There's way too much in terms of competition for eyeballs on different topics. Lots of people jumped in with new types of events. Whole Plant Expo is a brand new event that didn't exist last year that we staged this year online. Emerge is another one that Charles did. And so you can charge for booths, you can charge for tickets, you could charge for sponsorships, you could give away tickets and leverage everything on sponsorship. There's lots of different ways of building an event business model. You have to really consider who your audience is going to be, what the topics are, and how you're going to monetize that content. And I could tell you that Whole Plant Expo made probably every mistake along the way that we could make, but we figured out what the formula was by the end.
Great. So I just jumped in here to welcome Charles, who's managed to get in. Sorry about those technical issues there. Charles Warner, representing the Emerge conference that John just mentioned. I want to kind of ask a follow-up question there from something John just said about meeting goals with online events. Would everyone agree with this statement that no one has reached their expectations? Jake, I saw you raising your eyebrows there.
I think it depends how you measure success, and if your sponsors are saying after every single event, you exceeded my expectations, I want to do this again. Not every single webinar you're going to do is going to have 1,000 people tuning in live. I think you have to look in context. As we've gone month over month, we've seen people have that webinar fatigue. But to me, for us, if the sponsor's really happy, we're getting some positive messages of support coming in the email chain, we're getting some good comments on Instagram or social media. I mean, that's what we look for. I think we would feel that we failed to execute if, the webinar went down, or, there was a technical difficulty, somebody didn't show up, anything like that, isn't a real point of failure for us. But if we execute and maybe turnout isn't quite what we expected, we still chalk that up as a win.
Well, that was my point, Jake. Your events were awesome. And I'm sure that all the sponsors and attendees were very pleased. I could tell you that the attendees of Whole Plant Expo are very pleased. Could we build our business around Whole Plant Expo the same way we did it in 2020 and 2021? And the answer is no. We did not have the revenue. We didn't meet the revenue expectations. That's what I was talking about, is whether the business could stand up based on those expectations.
Yeah.
One of the interesting things that a digital event provides that a live event is harder to get from is you can change your KPIs and what you're measuring for success. So for example, we've been running MJBizCon really all through November with the big kickoff starting tomorrow for the core event. And we're measuring things like how many connections are being made. So as a B2B event, the core, we have several things we're trying to deliver. Part of it is delivering content. So how many people signed up for any given piece of content. But almost more importantly is making those connections. How many people visited a vendor and found out something about a new product? How many people held conversations and even got to a meeting? Those are things that we can't measure as well when we're all live in Vegas because it's 35,000 people and who knows who's talking to who. Here we can literally see it, and it creates like new dynamics in terms of what success looks like.
Yeah. So that links into exactly what sorry. Who did I cut off?
No, I was just going to extend on Pam's kind of point. When you talk earlier of what platform do you select, well, it goes down to what type of product do you want to create and an experience you want to create. I think we're all suffering from webinar fatigue at this stage, but that is because we've all tried something, to something new this year, which our audience is learning as well. And what we're ultimately trying to do is to keep education, information, and connection afloat through COVID and keep this industry moving forward. We've we're still in a very early stage on this space, and the requirement for really good quality education, really good quality information, really good quality debate, and an environment which facilitates connection and business development is so required. So what we've kind of lacked in maybe the experiential aspect, I do think the webinars side of an online event has helped facilitate business development. When we selected platforms, one of the key criteria for us was, in fact, how do we facilitate business development? We've all kind of had we've all worked with event apps from Wova and et cetera, that we've used at our in-person physical events, but we wanted to try and understand how do we maximize somebody's experience and bring them new business or new connections that they may not get before. And I think that's one of the beauties that we have with virtual events, that you are able to facilitate new connections without the requirement of them being in Vegas or being in London or being in Tel Aviv. We've certainly been able to overcome that hurdle, and I do think as we sharpen the experience and sharpen the product, the demand for that international connection isn't really going to go away. The physical barrier will remain. Not everybody will be able to get to Vegas or get to London or get to travel. But they'll still want to connect regardless. So how we move forward with the hybrid model is certainly going to be exceptionally interesting.
Yeah, definitely. So from my personal experience at the Cannigma, I've kind of worn three hats in this online conference space. That it's like, first of all, as a participant, anything that's interesting from like a personal or business perspective, and then there's covering these events as a journalist. Oftentimes, we're serving as media partners at the events, and of course, we run our own webinars, less kind of online conferences. And again, it circles back on, I think, that something that all of you have mentioned. It's the networking element that really seems to be missing, and also the decision to kind of say, okay, I'm actually not at work today. I'm not having any meetings today. I'm closing out my entire calendar, and I'm actually going to attend this event and do what I would do if I'd, for example, flown to Madrid to be at Prohibition Partners, which was the last live event that I went to before the lockdown. Which was, I was just talking to people face to face all day, and like I was at some of the panels, but for the most part, it was really about the networking. It was really about what was happening on the sidelines. So I want us to move on to talking about, from an organizer's perspective, how we bridge that, that gap. And I think also it comes back to something that Jack mentioned right at the beginning, which is how the platform that you choose to use supports this networking. Charles, do you want to start us off talking about this?
Yeah. And by the way, I really appreciate you guys having me here. This is great. It's kind of embarrassing. I'm Cannabis and Tech today and couldn't figure out how to get in here, but I agree with everything that's been said right here. And we had a unique situation where we didn't have our own events. We went and supported other people's events. Just like you said, we were journalists, we were media partners, sometimes speaking at them. So when this all kicked off, we sort of wanted to answer the call to try to come up with a way to reimagine virtual events. And so we did something a little bit different, where we got a platform called Hyperfair, where people created avatars and walked around in a 3D immersive world. And not only is it kind of cool, it's sort of fun, gamification, if you will, to keep people engaged, but we had some pretty good metrics too. There were 15,000 business cards exchanged, for a 3-day event. And those are, real analytics that you can see. There were 9,000 conversations, chats between people. And so we just kind of looked at it as, have great content, have something that's fun and engaging. And then most importantly, create an environment where business can be done. We actually had some business done too. So I think that it's definitely the platform, but it's also, you've got to have great content. And I think that, just like what John was saying, be reasonable with your expectations, because we expected, the moon and the stars and everything else. And sometimes you've got to just say, hey, you know what? It was good. People liked it. They're hopefully going to come back again. And ultimately, that's what we're trying to do. Just get people together so we can do business. And I heard people say, this is really weird from our event. Yeah, I saw him at Emerge and they were avatars. You know what I mean? Like they hadn't seen each other in 9 months. And that felt really good, that people could do it, even though it's not the same as in person.
How do they have drinks after it ends? How do we get that back?
They figured out how to do
You can drink in front of the screen.
So I don't even know how they did that. Leave it to the cannabis industry.
Pam, do you want to jump in here?
Well, I was going to riff that with MJBizCon. We're going to be doing morning yoga. And then there is,
Nice.
So, at least everybody has some kind of experience. And I think that is, to your question about networking, I think having that element of fun and just really having a shared experience is something that has been missing from live events. The flip side of that is the networking can be more efficient, which sounds sort of brutal, but I know at lots of events, you can find yourself sort of awkwardly having to chat with somebody who's not going to be helpful to you. And especially at our event, we get feedback from people who are the true experts, who are the true leaders in the industry, who just get, they're afraid to go out and walk the halls because everybody asks them every question under the sun, like, so cannabis, how do I start? And it keeps them from actually getting something out of the event. Whereas with the kind of matchmaking technologies that a lot of the platforms provide now, in the way that a dating app does, like what sort of person are you looking for? Swipe to find the person you want. It's a little bit more efficient in the dating world than going to a bar, and same thing in the virtual event world. You can really just pick the people who, you really need to evolve your business with.
I think also you get a couple of opportunities with the digital platforms. I found that you were able to get access to people you ordinarily wouldn't be able to get access to. And maybe because you wouldn't approach them, or they would be surrounded, or they just wouldn't have time for you. And also you can, as an influencer or as a leader, you can kind of like, I don't know what the word is, like titrate, let's say, how much access people get to you. In other words, they have to request a connection, then you're only chatting and you can answer, and you aren't like face to face with people. But I found that we saw conversations happening where we saw like big names talking to very little people, but both because of the nature of the event and COVID itself, that people were both getting a lot just out of the connection. There was almost like a deeper emotional connection that was made because everybody, this like we're all in it together feeling. We saw like a lot of openness, a lot of access and willingness, from kind of all over the industry.
Yeah,
one of the things that we try to do with the networking, sorry, Elana.
Oh, God.
One of the things that we try to do was bring in where people would automatically be networking anyway and try to incorporate that in. So we created LinkedIn pages that were segmented by ticket type so that those people could get in. There are all these different things that say that we're the LinkedIn of cannabis, and you know what? The LinkedIn of cannabis is LinkedIn. So we just brought LinkedIn and made that part of our networking for our event. That's for people who like to network anyway.
Yeah, I think it makes total sense. And it really reflects, in my experience, at least this year, it feels like the world's just open up. Like I really do feel like I can basically talk to anyone because everyone's at home and everyone's in a similar situation. And people are kind of more open to this style of interaction. All right, I want us to move on to talking about marketing online events, because I think this is something, you can have the best platform, you can have the best idea, and you can bring all the best speakers, but kind of as we mentioned at the beginning, there's an overload of these types of events that we're contributing to at this moment, and you need to market it right. Carey, do you want to start us off talking about this?
Sure, my pleasure. I think I wanted to talk more about the approach and kind of the philosophy in terms of the nuts and bolts, more than the nuts and bolts. But we can do both. I feel like you had to adapt the voice, you had to adapt the approach And it wasn't because it wasn't business as usual. It had to be a very different way of talking to people and creating buzz or interest in your event. And so I want to talk about our Global Hemp Day event, which we did in partnership with Arcview, because it's like a great example of how we put a lot of new ideas into play, in the sense that we built a partnership that, you know, almost not out of thin air, but we built a partnership that was based on expediency, which was a new model. We again had a different voice. It was one of empathy. We emphasized also the social justice aspect in talking about hemp and hemp for food and clothing and shelter. We took a really we adapted the approach to make it a more, I guess, emotionally compelling kind of proposition. We use our normal, you know, channels, an all on digital channel, obviously. And I think we were quick to market, so people were hungry and receptive and interested. I think we were successful in creating the community, moving the community feeling from the live events onto the digital side, based on the marketing that we did. But I'd love to hear how other people handled it. I can't say, again, we were making a lot of decisions really fast. We went with what worked. We went with our strengths. We went narrow and deep. We really played to our audience. Now it's all kind of a blur, honestly, looking back. Like we were saying, you know, COVID months or COVID days are like dog years, you know what I mean? So it was trial by fire.
Well, I think having a physical conference and a brand that people recognized definitely benefited. You know, there was that trust that people had in, okay, we will trial this new experience. You know, even though we haven't really done virtual events before, we will try it because we've been at the physical event. So I think that helped, you know, win over early audiences and give everybody some confidence. But from a marketing perspective, yeah, initially it was trying to convince people to get involved in, you know, what the virtual experience would be like. And then it was a case of, and then there was the overload of events, not just within the cannabis industry, but, you know, every accountancy firm, every media company was running virtual events, trying to make up for what was destined to be a significant shortcoming in their P&L. And, you know, we've all, you know, how we approached that really was going back to our initial strategy, which was really about what is our content for this going to be, and from the content, who are the core audiences. So we approached it from a content first perspective, and then built out content based on the audiences, and then from the audiences we tried to look at, you know, tried to obviously find them online, but it was from a marketing perspective, the marketing was led by the content. So whatever the content and the content pillars we were talking about, and, you know, so we split it up regionally, and then we split it up by vertical, and then apportioned, you know, key content topics and thought pieces that we wanted to discuss. We then marketed them somewhat individually rather than as a group and as a collective, because it would just be way too much. And then started kind of, you know, segmenting it into, all right, what are the core benefits of a virtual conference? And rather than combining them all together, you know, which is overload, we again segmented it all out. So we spent a significant amount of time segmenting out the marketing to, one, not overload, but also try and paint a clearer picture as to the, you know, why come to our event over another event, or why come to our event alongside another event, you know. So they would have a very clear value proposition. And I think that is definitely it worked to a certain degree for sure, but we're still at a very early stage of customers coming, or consumers and audiences recognizing that the experience is going to be different, accepting it, and them coming to terms. It's almost like the stages of grief, coming to terms that the physical won't replicate or virtual won't replicate the physical event, but accepting that this is the type of experience that I can get, and this is what I'm looking for. And I think we've got there with my own when I attend other events, not just within cannabis, but from media and creative, and I have kind of I was looking at the major event going on tomorrow, the Web Summit, major tech event. They have 100,000 people. They've built their own platform around it. They have created all these different features. One of the things that I think that they have leveraged to market their event, which is traditionally physical, is access to talent and access to speakers. So I think one of the things that we've all benefited from this year is our ability to reach. Now, usually, we've always kind of maintained a high value on really good speakers, but this year, because we haven't had the same barriers of getting them in a physical room, and it clashing with the diaries and all the fun that comes with programming, I think we've been able to use talent as one of the core marketing tools. And I think we will be leveraging talent, and leveraging the talent's audiences and networks for virtual marketing for years to come. And I do think it is definitely going to be more. It gives each event their ability to choose from a wider range of speakers. It gives each event its own ability to shape its own tone of voice, its own develop its own program, and also market its own merits. So when events have the same voices every single time, it becomes less attractive. I'm sure we could all name the same 5 people who speak at absolutely every single event. Like that, it's hard to market your event as something interesting when it's the same voices. So if you are asking people to come and spend time engaging with the content, give them content that is desirable and is in some way unique and pushes things forward.
I think that was one of our biggest challenges. I call it the sea of sameness, of like breaking out of that sea of sameness. Like everything just goes by in a blur. The speaker cards, the sponsor cards, the agenda. It's just like, oh my gosh, how do we break that? How do we disrupt that? How do we change that? And the attention is the most precious commodity. What makes us worthy of somebody's attention? Is kind of what drives me.
Yeah, we all put Bruce Linton and some of these same guys on every panel, but you look back at it, and it's about figuring out who's the next Bruce Linton. Maybe do they come from a different background? The beauty of these online events is we can elevate different types of voices. So I love what you're saying there, Carey and Stephen. And I would just add, just based on what you're saying is, your speakers are there because they have a following. Make it easy for them to promote it. Give them graphics with their face on it to put on social media. Elana with Cannigma, even before this event, passing around a shared doc that has sample copy. These are the small things you can do that make such a big difference. It doesn't have to end, after the webinar is over with. Chop it up, give them little bite-sized snackable content, little clips of them, 30 seconds of them making a really good point that they can put on their Insta or whatever. I mean, that goes such a long way because, we talked earlier about defining success. That success might not come 20 minutes after the event. It might take 2 months for that deal to close or a connection to come through, a couple degrees of separation. But yeah, I love that.
I think there's, oh, sorry, John, you go.
I was just going to say, I'm always stepping on you. What I was going to say is that one of the most successful marketing tools that we had were relationships with organizations that had large memberships. And we created essentially what amounts to affiliate relationships where these organizations can make money for themselves selling our tickets. And unfortunately, we came to that discovery late in the game. We would have set those up much further in advance than we had. But once we found that became a very big key to success. And in particular, working with nonprofits, because not everybody likes to help nonprofits. And we're on the medical side, so there are a lot of worthy organizations. And being able to route some money that way is a feel good for everybody. But it also brings you a lot more eyeballs. So we're all marketing to the same mail lists that we have, which I think is probably a subset of what Pamela has. And you need to break out from that. So, I know, Elana, you tried some programmatic advertising. We tried programmatic advertising. You got to break out of the normal and trying to find eyeballs where places you haven't looked before. Otherwise, we're all marketing the same people, and we're going to definitely give them webinar fatigue.
Yeah, that's really closely related to what I wanted to just point out, John, something that Stephen just mentioned, which I think is really kind of it's like the blessing and the curse of this period, is that you're not really saying come to this conference instead of another conference. Because if you're looking at the budgets that companies have put aside for going to conferences and expos, they can really afford to go to a bunch of different conferences. The question as to whether or not they, as I said before, clear out their schedule and really attend the conference in the same way as they would is a different question. But on one hand, it means that you don't need to kind of demand that brand loyalty of your attendees. And on the other hand, it means you're really kind of, the competition is so much richer there. And I think part of this kind of whole puzzle that we haven't gotten to so much in this conversation yet that I want us to take a few minutes to talk about is the transition from stands to computers. We've talked about the programming side, obviously the content creation, and we've talked about the networking, but a big part of the in-person events that we're missing out on is the stands. Jack, do you want to start us off talking about how you're dealing with this at Analytical Cannabis?
Yeah, I'd love to. So again, having come from a world where we run online events before the pandemic kicked in, we had our idea of how sponsorship should work, and obviously this year has turned that on its head. But pre-2020, we didn't have booths, we didn't have an online exhibition. Like I said right at the start of this conversation, we really relied on in-depth tracking to provide our sponsors with the information that they wanted to get out of the event. And that was really the main tool that we provided so that they could follow up post-event. We didn't really allow for much sponsor attendee engagement within it. But this year changed that, because suddenly we had to distinguish our online event platform and program that existed before the pandemic and the physical events that we wanted to move online because of the pandemic. And the main way that we could do that was to introduce more physical event-like opportunities. And that obviously translates to virtual booths or something of that description. And when we did that, I think when we all caught up last week, we all mentioned the skepticism that you get from a good portion of the sponsors, because they don't know if it's going to meet their ROI. They don't know how they're going to staff that, what they're going to get out of it. And in some cases, we just had sponsors that we've worked with for a long time that, because of the pandemic and the unknowns, if we think back to March, they just got rid of their budgets entirely for events, be it online or physical. They weren't interested at all. So trying to manage all of those concerns and worries and introduce something entirely new to many companies that had never been anywhere near an online event, it just wasn't part of their marketing setup. It is really challenging. And the one thing that I would say we learned this year is, it's not enough just to show them what they've got. Obviously, that's great, and show them what they're going to get. But you really have to guide them through that process to make sure that they're not passive, so that they engage with your event. They really give it, like you said, from an attendee perspective, you have to travel to an event, you have to actually, take it out of your schedule. But you need your sponsors to do that as well. It's not enough to just simply sign up, send the logo over, design the booth, and then look for the results afterwards. You know, they really need to take advantage of all of the tools and features that our different platforms provide. Picked up this year is guiding them through that process and providing a lot of literature around that, so that when it comes to the day, they already know exactly what they need to do and all of their different options. And then again, checking in with them on the day to make sure, are they actually doing all of the things that you discussed before, or are they just kind of sitting back? We all see people do it at exhibitions in the real world too, and hoping that people stumble by their virtual booth or sponsor page.
I think that's a really good point that we realized is you've got to coach them up. You've got to coach up your sponsors. You know, some of them had really good experiences because they participated all in. You know, they had really good promotional things. They had their salespeople out there working the floor, getting cards. They promoted it on social media. They did ticket giveaways, where we had other ones who didn't really participate in any of these ways. They kind of, like what you mentioned, you know, they got their booth and then they stand there with their arms crossed, you know, waiting for people to come. They have a much different experience. And, you know, something else that we did as well was we didn't think our event was adversarial to anybody else's event. So we wanted to play with everyone. We reached out to, you know, associations, organizations, nonprofits. You know, we raised a little bit of money. You know, we really tried to reach out to everyone. And what we found was not all partners are created equal. So some of our partners were really, really involved. And then other ones, you know, kind of like, they were like, yeah, let's do this. And then, you know, it was sort of crickets. So I would say you have to coach them up. You got to coach up your partners, make it easy for them, coach up your speakers, you know, make it easy for them to share it out. And especially, you know, do some meetings with your exhibitors or sponsors so that you can teach them some of the things we've learned from these virtual events so they can maximize their, you know, their ROI and have a good experience. That's one thing that we learned. You got to coach them up and kind of make it paint by numbers for everybody to have a better experience.
Yeah, this
the other thing about
always up.
I did it again. The other thing about stands versus computers is implicit in the question, because this is software. And the great thing about software, it's extremely malleable, and you can pretty much make it in whatever you want to make it. In a physical event, your stand is located on the show floor in one spot. In an online event, it could be in multiple locations because it's just a checkbox in most platforms to be able to do that. The other thing you can do is provide, depending on the platform, you could provide deep links from a booth out to the internet, so somebody can promote their booth, and when somebody logs in, they drop right into the booth as opposed to the show floor, show lobby, or something like that. So there are lots of other tools that make the marketing of the ability of an exhibitor or a sponsor to market their participation a lot more meaningful and bring more eyeballs to the content they want to see, which helps everybody.
One other thing that I did want to mention was it's great, like we've said throughout, that online events open you up to an international audience, but we realized very quickly that you have to be conscious of what your sponsors actually want to get out of it. And if you're working with somebody who's based in the UK, like some of our customers are, they probably just want to hear from people based in the UK. When you can show them that a whole bunch of people from the US or Canada visited their booth and had a chat with them, that they'll be pleased. They'll probably pass it on to their colleagues in those jurisdictions, but for the most part, it's irrelevant, and they're not going to consider that necessarily as contributing towards their ROI when they look at what they got out of the event. So that is something that everybody needs to bear in mind, that you get the right audience there for the sponsors that you bring on board with the event.
Yeah, definitely. Pam, I'd love to hear the MJBizCon take on stands, especially since, you know, kind of taking off right now.
Yeah, I do want to echo what the others have already said in terms of really engaging with the attendees at the show. If you're a vendor at the show, when you're at a live event, it would be an exaggeration to say that one can be passive, because it takes a lot of work to stand there and shake hands all day long, right? But we can create a stream by your booth, because we put stuff like beer at the end of the aisle, right? Like people are going to wander by who you can capture. Whereas in a virtual environment, you need to go get the people to come have the conversation. And often that requires a deeper level of connection, like starting the conversation about someone's needs, rather than just like, hey, $5 off, and shouting. If you can hand pick the people who might best need the product that you're offering. And for many of our clients, our vendors, exhibitors, partners, like 1 or 2 deals out of a show is going to make their year. You know, some of these products are really expensive. So this is an opportunity to do that more curated style of marketing, a content-based style of marketing that is slightly different in kind than one would do standing at a booth, where just like, you know, being friendly is sometimes enough. And it's more about volume. The other thing I would say is that too often, sometimes we think about events as being these standalone experiences, whereas for the person who's shopping for a new product, it's really a multimedia experience. They see your name on social, on your website, in print, and it can all add up together to an event, but that never stands alone. So you're really trying to build a message like across platforms. And there's something about like having a conversation focused just on the virtual event that makes it seem separate, when actually it's just part of a continuum, I think, when people are looking for a new product, a new partner.
Great. So we've got actually a really fantastic question that's been asked from someone in the audience. And I think this would be a really good question for us to wrap up on. Let's run it as a lightning round. I'll ask the question, and then if everyone can kind of share their take, because I'm pretty sure this is going to be relevant for everyone. So Carolyn has asked, what new monetization models have you tried or are you looking to explore in your digital events? And this is, you know, it's the money question, literally. Who wants to jump in first?
Okay, I will. Something that we didn't expect to have happen, but after our first event on our platform, we had other people come to us and say, we want to have our event on your platform. So we basically subletted out our platform. And we did not see that coming. You know, so it ended up being a way for us to generate some revenue that was just found money, you know, that we weren't even looking for.
Well, how nice for you, Charles. I think a lot of the platforms have the same kind of model, which is that once a person, you have to pay for each person that lands on your platform to some degree, right? Either you're paying for them in bundles or per person based on a scale. So once you have an event and you've brought somebody on the platform, you essentially paid for them with that first event. What we're thinking about doing is turning events into subscription and changing the model from being a 1-day programmed or 3-day program to basically being a 1-year membership to access content. When you think about events, it's like online events versus in-person events. It could be the same thing as telling a story either through a book or a movie. It's the same story in 2 very different media on how to consume that story, and the attendee or the reader or consumer of that content gets a very different experience from each. So we're not going to try to compete with in-person events. We want to create something that's different, tells the story in a way that is suited to the medium of online. And so again, it's software, and it's very easy to experiment. So allows you to make some mistakes and correct within the next month.
Yeah, we've done what Charles has done to an extent, and we're going to be doing that more in the future. But the other thing is actually much more closely linked to what Pam was discussing. We've found that people have had the chance to look at their marketing programs, and they want to do more around the events, so that it doesn't just become a standalone. So we've had a lot of success with maybe doing a podcast with a sponsor off the back of it, or repackaging their talk to create some written editorial content that packages it up in a different way and maybe appeals to different people who are at a different point in the buying cycle. That's probably the thing that we've had the most success with this year. Just stop looking at it as that sort of single thing. You deliver a talk or you have a booth. and then that's event over, move on to the next thing.
One revenue stream that we've added is for our partners who are positioning themselves for thought leadership. We're allowing them to present their own content, which when we're at the live event, we sort of run out of rooms. So it's actually harder. There's like a limit that physical space provides, that online we can let people present their own content.
I want to shout out to Carolyn for that question. Say I resent that question. But and we've tried and talked about a lot of what other people have shared. I think we've really understood that whatever you're doing has to be a hybrid, and it hasn't existed before. And it's going to be several iterations until we exactly get it right. But it's going to have to kind of encompass a lot of different possibilities. I feel like one of the lessons is that we can't ever really be surprised again by a pandemic. Like you get one shot, you know what I mean? Now we always need to have our plan B, you know, you can't turn around and, you know, look at your boss and say, oh, I didn't know this could happen. You know what I mean? Now this can happen. So I think we have to invent new models. We're kind of making it up as we go along.
Yeah. I'll jump in on that one. Stephen, I think you're talking and you're muted, right? There we go.
There we go. Look, yeah, a year of doing conferences, and the old mute button still tricks you. Like you know, and you're gonna get that. You're gonna get that, and people just accept it. And I'd imagine in physical conferences, if you can mute a speaker, sometimes you definitely would. So like we definitely, what's picking up from your point, Carey, you have to work an awful lot harder to get, you know, to prove the commercial model. I think sponsors are, you know, this is their first time, and this is their first time, you know, sponsoring a virtual event, so they are uncertain what they're going to get. So obviously, you know, you can't charge the premium of a traditional event, but what you have to deliver, you have to go way beyond in terms of delivery for each sponsor to ensure that they are satisfied with what you are delivering. I think one of the things with physical is you can create those private rooms that, you know, that you would like at physical events, and you can arrange meetings and you can do all of the introductory services that can be a little bit restrictive when, you know, when you're running around a physical conference center. But in the virtual environment, you can certainly facilitate business development more easily than you can, you know, you can in a physical. And I think that is from a commercial and a new business, you know, new business model is certainly makes virtual events quite, you know, quite in demand. If you are looking to raise capital, if you are looking to, you know, to find new suppliers, whatever the case may be, having a team curate that audience for you and curate that list for you through a center of an event is really kind of a new model that we probably touched on in physical but couldn't execute at the scale. Whereas I think with physical or with virtual, you can actually, you know, you can demonstrate the value in it and maintain some level of premium, and you're not going to get watered down by this transition into virtual. That'd be my 2 cents.
I'll hop in with mine. Per event tickets, obviously something worth considering. I mean, if you have some really VIP content, you're showing them something no one else really has. We do that for our virtual tours sometimes. In general, you know, if you do something like that, I think it's paid. I think it's important that you go the extra mile. You know, we like to partner that with a short report or just some take home, you know, where they can get some data or something out of it that's actionable. Of course, you know, sponsor fees are the classic way to do this. You know, do you put them at the front of the webinar, the back of the webinar. There's stuff that you gotta dial in over time. But we always like to offer discounts on bulk if people are willing to do multiple. Because of that, that's led us to now doing quarterly digital exposure packages, which blends, emails and, a webinar and, placement in different areas. We've even now pushed it to big, like, annual strategic partnerships where we have like a core alliance that actually chime in and help influence the content. Not, hey, what can we shill? But like more like, is this going to be the direction? Is this going to be a hot thing we want to talk about with the election coming up? We're trying to build a real community, I think amongst our network. We do also have subscription content. We have our Women's Investor Network. So I think it's cool to have networks within your network, that offer something a little bit different for different audiences. Rev shares, we've done something similar, working with New Cannabis Ventures. I think we did some MJBiz. I think we've done something with most of the people on the webinar in some capacity when it comes to partnering up and doing something that's most mutually beneficial. This is a really small industry, and I think it's really important that we do look out for each other and do things to amplify our messages, because ultimately we're working for the same goal of, promoting the power of the plant, removing getting more destigmatization around it. I would say for us, we have memberships because we do have our investor base at play. A great I love experimenting with hybrid once we get back to doing some more in-person events, like tacking on like a VIP dinner, which is an extra ticket. We did an event in the Hamptons, many months ago that ended up going really well. And, the demand for more in-person was high. But for us, I think it's important to say that there's always kind of, you approach it like sales. No matter what, you always have a free tier, something that people can discover you, get hooked, get excited about what you're doing, then have something that's a little bit easier to stomach, either for sponsors or for shit. And then a big Cadillac, someone's at my door, a big Cadillac option for those looking to go big. But in general, the goal is always keeping content strong, but we use it more as a user acquisition tool because we have different priorities. We also have our fund or broker dealer, our consultancies to support. And that's where our real revenue is being generated. My last thing is to just test, and listen to your stakeholders, your partners, your audience, pool them, survey them, find out what content they want to see. I got to go get my door. I'm so sorry.
I want to piggyback off of something Jake just said and about partnering. And I want to recommend to everybody who's planning an event to get a Charles. I was lucky. I have a Charles. It's that Charles who's right there. Charles was planning a merge the same time we were planning Whole Plant Expo, and we spent a lot of time on the phone together, sharing ideas, talking about what's working, what's not working, what our frustrations and obstacles were. And hey, Charles, thanks, man. If I'd ever thanked you, this is my public thank you for all the help. But that has been extremely invaluable. And as Jake was saying, we are a very small industry, and we should not be afraid to partner together, and rising tide lifts all boats.
I agree 100%, John. And I want to say too, for Arcview and for Carolyn and Jake who are here, the experience of working with them on Global Hemp Day just made such a heavy lift so much easier. And there were so many ways that, even unanticipated ways, that it benefited both of us. It was a really great experience. There were a lot of natural kind of affinities there, and then things that we discovered along the way that were really compelling. So I think the partnership was a great opportunity.
Cool. I want to try and fit in one more quick question because I think it's a really good question. I'm even going to try and look at that. I put it on the screen. So we've got a question here from Mark. Hi, Mark. What techniques are you using to engage patients or attendees after the event? And I think this is a fantastic point for us to finish up on. Anyone want to answer this question for Mark?
Well, we work directly with patients and attendees, so I'll take a swing at it. Patients are our attendees. First of all, going back to the software thing we were talking about before, you can engage and pull people through your platform. So you can deliver a survey that's not like an intake survey that people have to spend 10 minutes to fill out before they enter an event. You could give them a question every time they view a piece of content or something like that. They don't even know they're taking the survey, but they're giving you little bits of information throughout. And by the end of their experience of the event, they have completed the survey. So that's one way to engage with people. And once you have got them on your platform, consider them a member of your community. build a community. Think about ways that you want to bring them back and keep engaging people on the content themes that brought them there to your platform in the first place.
Yeah, I was going to follow with what John said there. What we did was sometimes people miss the event. They're like, oh, I wanted to go to it. I bought a ticket. I couldn't go. They heard about it on social or whatever. So for Emerge, we have 3 different re-emerges afterwards where we open up the whole world. We tell all the exhibitors to invite their lists. The people can come, from their ticket. They can come back. They can bring a friend. And actually, National Association of Cannabis Businesses had their social equity day in Emerge at a re-emerge. They invited like 200 people. So really, it's almost like renting out a convention center in between big events and just opening it up for more opportunities for networking and stuff. So that's one of the things that we gave the people was kind of like I heard mentioned before, but it's a 90-day access to the world where they can come in. And then we set up little business functions in between the emerges.
Yeah, we do a lot of different things, and we definitely do have a focus on demand as well, and making sure that everybody who signed up has that opportunity to keep coming back or come for the first time if they missed it live. But one specific thing that we've built out a lot this year is a private Facebook group. So no matter what online event, webinar, physical event, whatever it is that you attend that's anything to do with analytical cannabis, you will get an invitation to join that group. We do kind of scrutinize who's allowed in it because we want to have a real focused audience there, namely, scientists and scientific professionals to keep the discussion on topic for the things that we cover. And we've seen some decent audience growth there. And that's something that we want to build on next year because it does allow you to continue the conversation. And also, as you kind of pick apart the content from the event, it gives you somewhere to show it to people that's away from our publication. Because as a publisher, we have a lot of editorial coverage of the industry at large, and it's sometimes difficult. You can really lose your events in all of that. And it's nice to have it somewhere separate so that people can, re-engage and find the things that perhaps they missed during the live event.
We are also seeing some nice crossover with some of our old school media. So one of the interesting things about people registering for MJBizCon this past week alone, they're proving to be some of our most qualified magazine subscribers and are showing high interest in the magazine. So one of my follow-ups, right, is to engage those same key topics in print throughout next year as we go. And then get them to come back to MJBizCon 2021, of course.
It's a great idea.
I can't wait for 2021. You're breaking my heart not having this year. Florida COVID's missing out on my week, in late December. I think I would just quickly add, it goes along with what I was finishing up with before I had to get the door. I am so sorry about that. For us, we're an organization that also has all these other elements, the fund, the broker dealer, the consultancy. So for us, we're going to keep hitting them. We're going to keep engaging them. We're going to send emails and turn them on to our new services, probably to a fault, probably send too many emails. But we are getting better at segmentation. You're learning, you're seeing, certain groups are unsubscribing, and you start to dial it in and realize how you can kind of tailor your messaging appropriately. I think that's a really big part of it, is really doing that analysis and constantly looking at, that degree of feedback you're getting. If someone feels bought in, they're contributing the content, they're helping shape the content, they're going to be your biggest advocates. They're going to be the ones sharing about it, telling their friends about it, and participating once they get the ability to.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I think, Jake, your comment about missing MJBizCon is a good time for us to start wrapping up. However, it would not be an online event talking about online events if we don't have a little section to promote any online events that any of you have coming up. So anyone want to give little shout outs? Now is the time to do it.
Whole Plant Expo will be running through the end of December. So wholeplantexpo.com.
And go to emergecanna.com. We're having our winter emerge is kicking off December 15th. We're going to have the Cleos are going to be there. It's going to be bigger than last time. We have someone really, really big getting a Lifetime Achievement Award there. So it should be a lot of fun. If you haven't checked it out, it's Emerge Canna.
we're going to wrap up the year a little bit, with a little bit less content than typically. We're doing our Women's Investor Network WIN. They have a shopping edition with video promos of each brand. That's all in conjunction with Miss Grass. Technically, it runs from the 30th to the 6th, but really Monday the 7th is the real day. I think we're going to do a separate segment around it and give all of the different companies that are featured a chance to talk about what they're doing. And then on the 16th, we got a big town hall coming up. We're talking about New Jersey. We're going to try to do one for each of these new markets coming online, and not feature just kind of a central speaker, but instead let a lot of different voices enter the equation. Thank you.
For us, you can head over to analyticalcannabis.com, webinars and events, easy to find on there. The next one that we've got coming up is actually next week, December 9th, and that's going to be focused specifically on the science of cultivation and horticulture. So we've got a whole bunch of technical folk from that space who are going to be sharing their research and from a technological and scientific perspective on how we're, that's going to move forward, and we're going to improve the industry in that sense.
Of course, we've got MJBizCon at MJBizCon.com. So today actually is Associations Day, to everyone's point that the value of having these nice association partnerships. And then tomorrow is the keynote speaker, who's John Mackey. He's the CEO and founder of Whole Foods, and he's talking about sustainable capitalism. So as I understand, both in the sense of let's not burn the planet down, and in the sense of let's build businesses that don't crash, after 6 months, let's say, in cannabis. I think it's a relevant message. And yoga and a party at the end. So it's not Vegas, but it's not bad.
Well, it'll do. I'm looking forward to attending. I've kind of been checking it out so far, really enjoying it. But of course, looking forward to Vegas next year, fingers crossed, and Tel Aviv and to California and everywhere else this fantastic industry brings us. So Prohibition Partners Live has wrapped up for the year. It's all 200 plus hours of content are available on demand if anybody wants to recap. But yeah, we'll be announcing 2021 plans soon. Trying to finger in the air with the old COVID is challenging, and it keeps us all on our toes, because we obviously want to create great experiences, but we want to keep people safe as well. So it's how we can be responsible, but also continue to facilitate growth within the industry.
And I have to respond to the question about whether there's tickets still available to MJBizCon. I can't see how to actually comment. Yes, of course. And there's two levels. There's a free level, which is thank you. There's a free level, which gives you access to the keynotes and the vendor exhibits, the showcases. And then there's a paid model that gets you access to all the content, including all the content that we pre-recorded, that we did previously all through November. MJBizCon, right there.
Very nice. All right. Well, thank you all so much for joining. This has been really interesting and insightful. I think, we need to end this up with, in Judaism, we say next year in Jerusalem, but next year in Vegas, right? I hope to meet you all in person.
Next year anywhere.
Next year anywhere. Wherever we can all be in the same place.
Wherever you can be first. Yeah.
That's it.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you
Perfect.
soon.
Thanks, Elana. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.